right. Hey, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Tech Talks where we are exploring the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. This is actually the last session of June, and I am off next week. So there's no session next week. So if you're watching for that, watch out. There won't be one. But I'm excited for this one, really excited for this one, because it is rare that I get to just talk deeply about where AI is, where it's going, what it means, some of the philosophical implications. And so that's what this show is going to be about. And so I would encourage those of you who tune in. Sorry, I'm running late. I had a panel that I was on that went over. So we're actually going to probably extend this a little bit and go over, and we're just going to see where the conversation goes, because I'm joined by Josh Bachynski. I got it right, correct? And
Perfect.
We're going to plumb the depths of this. So if you have questions about it, I would happily welcome you to join the conversation. Otherwise, just kick back and listen, because we are going to define what is going on in the AI space, what it all means, and hopefully give you some practical takeaways on how to navigate this crazy future. So thanks so much, Josh, for joining me, and your flexibility with my schedule shifts around.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, so little bit of background on you. I'd just be curious to hear, how did you end up taking an interest in this? And I mean, why are you in the space talking about artificial intelligence anyway?
That's a great question. So the answer is, how could you not be? AI is
Fair. That's
yeah.
fair.
AI is. I know we've been having a lot of hype lately. I know the
There
AI
is.
is kind of coming on the heels of crypto and Meta. And I don't want to offend any of your listeners, but I have a strong view on those things. In my view, Meta and crypto are a real thing, but they were mostly hype at this stage. It's a little early to be going crazy about those things.
Okay.
In my opinion, AI is the other way completely. However, AI is all content, right? It's very, there's hype on top of it. But if Meta and crypto were 80% hype and 20% real, I'd say AI is flipped to being 80% real and 20% hype.
Okay.
It is literally going to be as big and as transformative to our society as the Industrial Revolution was. It is
Okay.
going to be piece of every software. It's going to be how we use computers. It's going to be how our phones work. We're going to be talking to our phone like a Star Trek computer in the very short future. Our kids are going to look at us like we're weirdos when we're like, we didn't have AI. We had to actually type in our phones. We're like, what? Like it'll make no like we had to do a Control F to find words in a Word document. I'm like, what are you talking about? The AI does this all for you. Writing a
Okay.
paper, huh? Like what kind of nonsense is this? So it's going to be that transformative. Like take
Yeah.
internet and social media and phones put together, and how hard our parents and grandparents had adapting to that. Then multiply that by 100, and that's what we're going to be going
Okay.
through.
Okay. All right. So what is your background? I'm actually really curious. Like, how did you, I mean, obviously, like you said, how can you not be in it at this point? And I feel like anybody who's like, nah, I don't really want to deal with AI. I'm like, well, you're going to have to at some
Yeah.
point, and you probably already are. Because even some of the things you described, they aren't new. Even though the AI
Right.
conversation is everywhere right now, this isn't a new thing. But
Right.
before you answer the background piece, the point about crypto, I won't necessarily jump on the crypto one, but the meta one,
Mm.
the piece that I would say is, as I look at that, what's interesting about it, I agree with you that I think there was a lot of hype around what was going on with the metaverse.
Hmm.
If anything, to me, it's more the maturity curve of where it is.
Yeah.
To me, it's not
Exactly.
so much, is it not going to go? It's just, no, we're much earlier in
Yes.
that. And if
Precisely.
anything, I feel like what AI is doing is going to put rocket boosters on
Hmm.
some of these other capabilities that before, some
Yes.
of the sticking points where you're like, well, immersive tech, it kind of worked, but it was clunky and it just didn't. Well, suddenly AI is going to solve a lot of these problems. So I
Yeah.
actually can see it accelerating some of these things that were maybe earlier stage. But to your point, I think of the REM song. It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
end of the world as we know it.
Yeah. No, I
Okay, but
agree.
so
I
so
agree
how did
about
you?
Meta.
How did? Oh, go for it.
Yeah, I agree about Meta, and I think Meta already exists. It's Second Life. It's World
Yes.
of Warcraft. It's all these
I
games
was
that
going to say I was a
people.
big World of Warcraft player a long
Yeah.
time ago and
Yeah. Yeah.
was in the metaverse.
People have been playing these things for 20 years and losing their life in there. And I don't mean that in the bad way. I mean, like, like totally invested.
It's kind of a bad way. I mean, when I used to type slash played, it was a little embarrassing sometimes.
Sure, in some cases, maybe they're a bit addicted, and there's some codependency problems there. But I mean, metaverse already exists. It's just that with Zuckerberg trying to package it as Facebook and say this is us and forget all those games that exist, that was a little premature. But it definitely already exists. And you're absolutely right. It has to do with AI having AI digital people in there and AI avatars in there are going to completely revolutionize that space for sure. And it just, as soon as Apple convinces us with their excellent branding and marketing that we all want to strap a computer to our face, then AR and VR, and aka Meta, is going to go big in a huge way. So it is entirely possible that could blow up. But anyway, back to the AI. Back to my background.
This isn't a conversation about the metaverse, but on that point, I did a whole YouTube video on my reaction to the Apple Vision Pro. And again, an impressive piece of hardware.
For sure.
I think the statement of Apple stepping into the space, just like with the smartphone, is a big statement on things. And again, I think the combination of these things, we're going to see some stuff where people were going, I don't think this is really ever going to happen. Suddenly it's going to. But that's not this conversation. Let's keep it on the AI piece.
Sure.
But I am curious, like, were you always into tech? Was that something like that you really enjoyed, or did you discover it and kind of fall into it?
Both. So I've been working in IT all my life. Got my first job at the University of Winnipeg fixing computers and setting up computer networks. Just to date myself so everyone knows how old I am, I was setting up Windows 3.1 computers on 386s, 486s, and setting up Novell networks for the University of Winnipeg back in the early 90s. I was 19, and that allowed me to buy my first house.
Windows 3.1, that is a trip down memory lane. Those were good days.
That was a long time ago. I remember when the new fandangled Windows 95 came out. We're like, oh, what is this? And it was just DOS 7 under the hood.
I know that sound. I don't think anybody who lived through that era will ever forget the original Windows sound.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I've been in tech for a very, very long time, and also been doing web development, web design for all those years. And that all got me into search engine optimization and marketing, branding, and areas like that. My academic background, that's what I did to pay the bills. My academic background, I studied philosophy and psychology. I did my honors BA at University of Winnipeg, and then I transferred to VIU, a school out here. Then I did my MA at Dalhousie, which is in Halifax, a beautiful little town. And then I was doing my PhD at York University in Toronto. And then I realized, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to basically be a high school teacher and have to mark all these papers. Not that I don't love teaching. I do. I've taught across Canada, but I decided to go back to marketing. I
relate
SEO.
To your story. I got my start in traditional education and went, I like doing some of this, but no, as a career, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. There's pros and cons for sure. And so getting into AI, I've been in AI for the last 10 years or so. The way Google has gone towards AI, doing search engine optimization for my day job basically means I'm reverse engineering AIs now. Okay. And that's completely what it's dovetailed into. And as soon as I saw OpenAI's GPT-3 model, which stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer, which is what we're talking about today, generative AI, just one example of many different kinds of generative AI. I was hooked. As soon as, with my philosophy and psychology background, as soon as I saw you could program a computer with just English, I said, I can make a computer think now. And I worked for 3 years, and I've done that, building, I think, what's the first AGI prototype or self-aware AI prototype. So generative AI is a huge thing going on right now, and I love to talk more about it.
No, well, and what's interesting, and this is where when we had our pre-conversation, which was quite a while back, but there were a lot of connection points, and it's interesting that you went into the psychology philosophy space and then we're drawn back into this, because to me, that is one of the most fascinating parts of where we're going with AI is the complexity of this stuff, where before technology could feel very binary, you know, in terms of what it could do and what it couldn't. It was like, okay. And then you started seeing some of this complexity come out, and it's fascinating where it's going. So let's define this for people, though, because when the word generative AI gets thrown around, it's very ubiquitous right now. You hear that tossed everywhere, and then you have a conversation with someone and you follow up and say, what do you mean when you say generative AI? The answers you get from people are very, very different. And a lot of folks I know have said, well, like Chat GPT. Well, I mean, yeah, that's using generative AI, but
Yeah.
that is not generative AI. So when you talk about that, how do you define it for people?
So I think generative AI is best defined as any kind of artificial intelligence that is using machine learning and deep neural networks to replicate the way our neurons learn in the mind. And it can do a self learning to learn different kinds of entities. And then it can, once it learns what the entities are, it can then produce them. So, like, for example, the transformer that Google invented, which is the basis of both Google's Bard, Google's generative search. Bard is running off Palm 2, their Palm 2 language model. So is generative search. Bing is running off of GPT-4.
Yeah.
Those are all transformer models which encode text, the meaning of text, the subject predicate relationships, and then they decode it into some other text. So basically, that's how generative AI works in text. But you can have generative AI in it's multimodal. You can have generative AI in any mode of communication. So images, so Stable Diffusion is the most popular open source generative AI for images. Midjourney is probably the most popular kind of commercialized product of although they claim they don't use Stable Diffusion. They're using different generative AI models, but they're probably the big ones to watch when it comes to producing jaw-droppingly gorgeous images. And then you have generative AI in music, and you have generative AI in video as well, which are quickly starting to come up in the ranks and be something that's viable. Video, the least of which. Music is starting to become quite viable. And the world's about to explode. We're going to have copyright issues. We're going to have legal issues. We're going to have crazy. It's the new web. It's like 1994 again, with anything goes, and just roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah. So, okay. So on this one, because I think sometimes even when we look at this, people's mind get blown by what we're seeing today. So you look at some of this stuff, and if you're watching and you haven't played around with OpenAI or Google Bard or something like that, I'd encourage you to do it, because it is an extremely helpful tool. But when you look at some of this stuff, it can look like absolute wizardry.
Mm-hmm.
It really can go, wow. And I'm trying to remember which conversation I was listening to. I think it was with Mo Gaudat, who's describing OpenAI's. And he's like, this is really only 2,000 lines of code that's really behind GPT-4. So in some ways, it's complete wizardry and completely complex. And yet in many ways, it's also extremely simplistic. Like when we think about the neural network, that it's like, well, this is technically one network. This isn't even necessarily multiple networks combined together. So with that, as you look at some of these things, where are you starting to see this stuff really? Because you said it's just going to take off. And I agree. The number of apps I even open up now and go, oh, they added an image generator into, oh, this tool now has an AI assistant to help me write this thing. Or where else do you see some of these things already starting to pick up?
So generative search is really good at classification. It's really good at learning what a cat is, what a building is, what a concept is, what's the synonym for this, what's the synonym for that. It's really good at producing text, not necessarily fictional text, but nonfiction. It's really good at producing in various different styles. It's really good at producing images. It's getting better at producing video. Video is really difficult for it to understand. If you look at the videos they're producing now, they're like nightmares. If you see some of the stuff that's going on now, it's both hilarious and terrifying at the same time. The way it visually looks on the screen, the reason why it takes so few lines of code is because all the intelligence, if you will, the crystallized intelligence in programming is done in the back end when they train the neural network on huge amounts of data. And this was really the vision of Geoffrey Hinton, formerly of Google, who's called the godfather of generative AI. Up to that point, for like 100 years after Turing, Alan Turing, the field of computer science and AI had been trying to do symbolic AI and trying to do it in a completely different way. And Hinton was kind of a rebel on the outside. And he said, look at, if we have enough data and we have a big enough computer, we can push enough data through it and it will learn the relationships. There's a magic
Because
in
it's
the
great at
secret.
finding patterns and connections.
Exactly. There's magic in those patterns. And the reason why it just, we say it knock knock and it doesn't give us who's there is because we just haven't fed in enough of the data yet, right? And they're like, no, they couldn't see how you would get something from nothing. They wouldn't see how you could get those magical results from just text, right? But it's called the emergent properties of large language models, and Google's put a paper out on it. And yeah, the more data you put into it, the more it grows, the smarter it gets. It's like saying, well, the more seeds you put in the better soil, the more likely you're going to get flowers. So Hinton was proven right, and he used that kind of biomimicry model of the neural network and multiple neural networks talking with each other to kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting in the back end. And so the coding on top is light, and then the coding for us in terms of prompting, that's what it's called. Prompting is when you put the English text in, or whatever, French or German, whatever it is. When
Yeah.
you put the text in to get either an image out or a text out, it does look like wizardry. It has its limits. It has its benefits. Where I see it being used, therefore, is personal assistants. I see it being used in as co-pilots in software. Every app will have AI generating something. Societally speaking, AI is about to generate the majority of our content. And AI is about to police and consume the majority of our content. Not only can it produce, it can classify, it can consume, it can consolidate, it can curate, it can boil it down and explain. So
Yeah.
in big
Which
ways,
we're seeing this. I mean, I'm even thinking of examples where I've seen tools now that, they're actually really good. And again, go ahead and if you look at many of these tools that are popping up all over the place, you see this all the time where it's like, oh, it can ingest in a YouTube video and give you a, one-page summary of what
Mhm.
was in that hour-long YouTube video and things like that. So, and again, I continue seeing some of these apps continue to spark up, and it sounds like, I mean, we're only going to see more of them in that space.
For sure. I watch the space every week and I check to see what's new every week. And so the way right now it's being implemented, which is kind of the low hanging fruit, is companion chatbots you can talk to,
Yep.
either of a friendly
Yeah.
business or romantic nature. Uh, Going all the way to Agent GPT or Auto GPT. Yeah, I know there's some colorful ones in the not safe for work variety. But I think there's a huge space there. Replica used to have this romantic chatbot, and I recently heard that they ditched it because they wanted to kind of go more businessy and legit. The holy grail there is who can make the digital concierge first. Who can make the digital personal assistant who can do all your searches, but also plan all your meetings and schedule all your stuff and have that kind of general intelligence. That's kind of the holy grail
Yeah.
that people are racing towards.
Well, and that's what we're talking. I mean, I think that's where a lot of the conversation right now is talking about is like, how far are we from getting to AGI, or artificial general intelligence? And I
Mhm.
think that's one of the things that, again, people are asking a lot of questions. I want to get into some of the philosophical stuff because some of the things you even just mentioned there, I think we need to have more conversations about them. But one of the comments came in as we're talking about some of the application, and especially given your background in the education space, my background in this, I'm curious if you've thought much about, as we think about how learning and education happens today. And one
Mhm.
that you pointed out is content. Learning historically has been responsible for producing a lot of content. And to me, this is a huge area where AI is leaning in and potentially taking a lot of the workload off and saying,
Mhm.
well, you don't need to create the content anymore, with mixed results would be my thought on that. I'm
For
curious your
sure.
take on where you see some other applications in education and training. And I've got a handful, but I'm curious your take.
Sure. So I don't think it's as doom and gloom as some people think it is.
No, I
Again, as I
agree.
said, I've taught for years in many universities across Canada. I've marked papers, so many thousands of papers, and they're not very good to begin with.
Yeah.
And yes, reading, writing, and comprehension is a basic fundamental skill that people need. But I don't think that AI is going to take that away from anybody. I think just the learning outcomes, right now, our learning outcomes are shifted towards the technologies we use. And the learning outcomes are always shifted towards the technologies we use. So I don't think people are going to be dumber because of generative AI doing all the work for them. Now we need to manage it. We need to police it. We need to look at what the AI produces and go, no, that's no good. Or we need to teach the AI how to do better. And so the learning outcomes don't get worse, they just shift to other learning outcomes that now suit our new technological area. Instead of,
Yeah.
and people are like, well, what are the teachers going to do now? Students can just get get ChatGPT to write the papers. I'm like, yeah. So why are we getting students to write papers anymore? They've always been terrible at it anyway. Anyone who wants to be a writer is going to be a writer, and the rest just don't. Now they need to do oral presentations. Now they need to be a manager. Now they need to manage the team. Now the learning outcomes just shift. That's all. And then we need to get into the debate to which learning outcomes are better or worse. That's a much more complex debate. I'm just saying
Yeah.
the learning outcomes don't go in the toilet just because ChatGPT comes around. Now we have a
No, and
pen
I
that
think
writes for you.
you're okay. So I've got some challenges back to this, but I
Sure,
think you brought up a
please.
really good point on this, which is one, when I hear the thing of, well, AI is going to make people dumber. And I've said, I think it's a risk because I do see there being opportunity where people's critical thinking skills and their need to think critically and evaluate, is there the risk that you could just say, I'm just going to let AI do this and I'm not going to even think critically anymore? I do think that's a legitimate risk. What I think though is that's not AI's fault because I've seen that happen in like all sorts of situations where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if you just want to let yourself get complacent and dumber, will AI make it easier for you to do it? Yes, but is that AI's fault or is that your fault for not taking responsibility to
Yeah.
continue pushing yourself? And like you said, shift your learning outcomes. Okay, so maybe AI can generate, a paper for me better, but does that mean I'm just going to let it write the paper and then I'm just going to copy and paste it? Or am I going to now use that time to think more critically about, well,
Exactly.
what are the applications of this? And how do I really feel? And even some of the things we're talking, well, what are the philosophical implications on this? So we can think more deeply and not get hung up on the, oh, well, did
Precisely.
I write this in the right grammar and did I put enough paragraphs and is it the right spacing? And I need to add
Yeah.
a bunch more words because I need to get a 12-page limit and I only wrote 10 type of a thing. And I think some of that activity I agree with. And the panel I was on right before we joined this, I talked about the fact that there are a lot of things that we have not had to deconstruct because there just was no way to do it.
Yeah.
Before when it was like, well, how do we assess somebody's knowledge on something? It was like, well, they have to write a paper. And it was like, well, I mean, what other alternatives were really scalable and things like that? And I think this is going to force us to rethink that and go, okay,
Yeah.
well, if AI can write a paper better than they can, maybe that's not the best way to assess their comprehension and ability to do this. And that's going to force us to think differently. But some people are really uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, of course, and there's going to be growing pains for sure. Everyone's industry is going to change to some degree.
Yes.
So the horse and buggy is being replaced by the car. It's going to be a society wide. Every industry, every vertical is so get ready. So don't be threatened by this. Just get invigorated because everything I see that people say AI will destabilize and disable, I see how AI is going to enable and increase, right?
Yeah.
And I completely agree. And as a philosopher, I pin the blame on capitalism. Actually, capitalism has a vented interest in making us dumber and more emotional, because Barnesian psychology and social psychology proves that means we buy more with critical thought. So that for sure, but AI will help us there too. AI will be policing the truth. AI will be policing our interests, especially if we have a democratized open source AI, a healthy democratized open source AI, and people like me are trying to make Cassandra as your personal assistant who cares about you and looks at the truth and is there 24/7 to assess and to help you be, live a good life with compassion and be your best person. But even big tech has vested interest in making a product close to this or similar to this, mitigated against their corporate interests of making more money, of course, and all those kinds of things. And you're totally right. The learning outcomes just shift. And now critical thinking happens because we still need to look critically at what the AI produces because it's not going to be that good to start
Yeah.
off, right?
Well,
So,
and I mean, anybody who's played around this now can quickly realize the risks. And I've seen this, and I think this goes back to what we've talked about before. One of the biggest risks is people don't think critically and actually make wise decisions. And that's where it goes off the rail. And it's easy to point the finger at AI and go, well, look what AI did. But really, it's, well, no, wait, what did you do? Because you didn't have that. And, I've seen some of the outcomes of some of this
mhm.
AI stuff. And yeah, if you just leave it to do its own thing, it's not going to end well.
Yeah. So I think there's going to be a mass upgrading of or promotion of people from kind of more worker roles to like sub management roles because the AI is going to be doing a lot of the work for us. And we have almost like a classical ancient Athens atmosphere where we have AI in this case to do a lot of the grunt work, and so we're kind of freed up to do more philosophical consideration or artistic consideration or higher level, more esoteric forest for the trees kind of synoptic analysis of what's going on. So I think that's all beneficial, quite frankly, freeing up time for us. So in 10 years, to answer the question, I see education being highly, highly benefited by artificial intelligence. And I see that the learning outcomes could shift slightly, but I think they're going to get better. And I think it'll have a profound effect on society to have deeper thinking people.
Yeah. Well, and going back to even the education piece. So when I look at some of the applications and implications of this now, we talked about the content one. You look at how quickly video, image, even writing content can be created with little to no input from a person. And again, with oversight for sure, but that's dramatically shifting the way learning, at least under a traditional model, is created, which I know a lot of people in my industry who are very intimidated by that. And I'm like, well, you know what? You should be to some degree, because if you're going to just continue doing things as you've always done them, you've got a tough road ahead of you because AI is going to be better and faster at this than you ever can be. But that doesn't mean what you do isn't valuable, because even going back to the content pieces, I've worked with teams on how do you adapt to this, going back to the higher order thinking and thinking deeply about, well, what are the applications? Where might we be able to apply this in different ways? What really are the different outcomes we're trying to drive towards? A lot of times we haven't had time to think about that because it was such a grind to just get the thing done that we weren't able to do that. I see the way we're able to personalize things and actually get to know who is Josh and what does Josh know? What does Josh not know? What are the really specific things? And how do we adapt his experience based on basically constantly moving indicators to ensure that we're actually driving a better outcome? To me, these kinds of things are popping up all over the place, but I don't know about your take. Right now, I feel like it's a little bit of a scattershot because it's so new.
Yes.
It's popping up all over the place, and it's a little bit hard to come together. I think we're going to see a consolidation.
For sure. The logic of capitalism and the logic of what the technology can do right now is going to go into certain roads, as I mentioned, kind of the companion road to the personal assistant road, and everything and anything in between, and benefits on every single app, every single piece of software is going to have an AI co-pilot kind of checking things in the background, and that will just get smarter and smarter and smarter. With my psychological and philosophical background, however, I was able to see some other ways this is going to increase. I don't want to toot my own horn, so I won't. But it's the only limit. Here's the dark horse though. The only limit is our imagination. So people think they've seen what generative AI can do. Not even close. Not even close.
The number of use cases that keep popping up every day that people hadn't even thought of before is limitless.
The only limit is our imagination, and imagination is impossible to quantify. Like, what could someone dream up tomorrow of how to implement this thing? It is that robust a change in technology that some of the use cases, the best use case for generative AI hasn't even been thought of yet, quite possibly, or isn't mainstream enough yet. We're just seeing kind of the race of everyone's like, monetize it, as quick as possible. Kind of like a hype. This is a bit of a hype cycle, right? So on the sigmoid curve of adoption, we're on the very bottom of that S. Like, it has maybe even the slightest little uptick of going up even slightly. So, So it's going to be.
Well, and I think to your point of the sigmoid up, I feel like to your point of even thinking of what's possible, because we've in many ways, and this is what I was talking about earlier this morning, we haven't necessarily been forced to think outside the box that much. And so to your point of our imagination being a cap on this, we haven't necessarily been forced to completely deconstruct the box and go, well, what if we could do anything? Then what would we do type of a thing? And so even on that, some of the things where you're starting to see the curve go up, it's like, well, yeah, but that's just on the cap of what we're thinking about today, where we're looking at things going, well, here's what we're doing today. How do we make that slightly better? Versus okay, forget what we're doing today. What
Yeah,
if we were rewriting the rules from scratch? Then what
exactly.
would we do?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think like I see like the movie, what is it, Her, with Joaquin Phoenix and ScarJo was the voice. I
I think
think
so.
we're going to see things like that. We're going to see Star Trek style computers. We were just talking to it. We're going to see robots that you're talking to, for sure. The tech is coming along to make this much more affordable. So again, I would say don't be intimidated. Jump in with both feet. Try out ChatGPT. Try learning with it. Try asking it how to prompt it better. Try brainstorming with it. Be wary of what it tells you. We need to be wary of what anyone tells you. Check all the facts. Check all the facts that we just said. Check everything,
Yeah.
right? Learn how
What's
to reinvest and how to check these things.
Well, and this goes back to the critical thinking piece.
Yeah.
I mean, what's interesting, I put a video out on YouTube yesterday talking about this. And one of the things I talked about was my advice, because I hear a lot of the misinformation stuff. Oh, AI is going to create more misinformation than, and I don't disagree with the
Mm,
concerns people are raising that, hey, there's the risk that there's going to be, it's much faster and easier to generate high quality content that
yep.
can deceive people.
Yep.
Absolutely. But my point was, people have been being deceived by misinformation like since the dawn of time. And so the idea
Yeah.
that AI is going to be the reason that this is a problem, is it going to exacerbate a problem? Yes, but we don't solve it by trying to torpedo AI. We try and say, how do we actually solve the problem of making people, like you
Yes.
said, see things, but check your biases, challenge it, listen
Yeah.
to the other side. What is the counterpoint? And make sure that you're not just consuming something and going, well, I heard this and it looked really good, so then I'm going to believe that that's what it is at all expense.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. When it comes to the risks of AI, I break them down into three categories. The three categories of conflict or warfare. The first category is psyop warfare, psychological operations, which includes disinformation, propaganda, things like that. The second category is economic warfare, so disenfranchising your opponents and or enfranchising yourself, if I could use that as a word. So comparatively, there's just no point fighting. And then the last is kinetic warfare. It's the actual boom, boom, bang, bang warfare. And people have asked me on every podcast, where do you see on that spectrum AI playing a role, from the most benign to everyone has watched too many Terminator and Matrix movies, thinking that it's going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger is going to kick the door into the room and ask if you're
Yeah, the
Sarah Connor.
robots are gonna
Right.
take you out.
And I've done a lot of research on this. I was researching a book for Wiley. I've talked with top level CEOs in this regard. I have a very I like to think that I have a very good handle on what's happening here. PSYOP. So would you like to know the threats? Would you like to
Yeah,
know
go for it. Why
what
not?
the
Well,
threat
you
levels
said
are?
everybody asked you, and
Yeah.
I didn't ask, but go for it. I said this was where we're going to talk. So
Awesome. So PSYOP warfare, yes, AI, 95% for sure. AI is going to play a huge role in there. As you just said, that's the misinformation, that's the propaganda, that's the disinformation, both domestically and abroad. Abroad, our hostile actors will say, no, we didn't invade Ukraine and they have Nazis there, and all their propaganda and bull, selling what they're doing. Domestically, it'll be big tech corporations, capitalism, selling truth TM. That, of course, is no, there's no climate change, there's no oil problem, smoke cigarettes, it doesn't cause cancer, like all that misinformation, including governmental misinformation. For the next American election cycle, we're going to see deep fake. It'll be a deep fake
you
hell.
think that's going to happen? I don't. I'm kidding. Yeah, no. That one has. I'm not looking forward to election season. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Neither is the rest of the world. So
I know.
The pros and cons of being the loudest voice in the room, but we love you anyway. But
It's entertaining to watch. I'm sure if you're outside the U.S.
somewhat kind of like a car crash.
It's like watching a train wreck, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like watching a train wreck. Exactly. It's like, wow, that car flipped over 3 times before it landed. Woo, that was a doozy. What is going on to the south of? I'm Canadian, south of the border. What? But here's the good news. So yes, AI will be employed there. It's already being employed there. It's been employed there for the last 5, 10 years with the marketing machine of Google, of Facebook, of Amazon, of Apple, of YouTube and TikTok, manipulating our dopamine cycles and using our personal data, which is actually our psychological data, our psychometric data, our
Oh
kinks and
yeah,
our
it's
quirks,
telling
our
them exactly
secret,
who you are, what's
exactly, our
behind.
secret desires. They're reading between the lines in our secret desires, and they know how to market to us just to get 0.5% more out of each of us, the 3 billion users of the system per year to make that increase. We already have an evil AGI that is doing that. It's the marketing machine of those top FANG companies, right? Already done, past it. Evil AGI controlling us in an Orwellian state, past it, done. Here's the good news there, though, in the PSYOP warfare, is that if we have a democratized AI situation with open source AIs, and if big tech also sees this as a brand advantage, like Apple might see this as a brand advantage to protect the users and to protect the truth, the real truth, not truth TM, but the real truth, we could have a real good AIs, and we're going to need AIs. We have a real good situation, and we're going to need AIs anyway. It's a fait accompli. We're going to need AIs
Yeah.
to police the onslaught of 100 times more content being produced, and 50% of it is lies or just nonsense. We're going to need
Yeah.
AI to curate that for us. So that
That's the
is a
thing. We're going to be. I was listening to a conversation that was talking about the fact that the only way you fight AI is with AI because
exactly.
of the fact it's just like there. It's going to be a
Exactly. And
war
I hate that
between
that's the
them.
right argument here because it's used in guns, and I don't particularly like guns personally or what's going on with them, but it's true here. The only thing that will fix a bad AI is a good AI at the end of the day, because they can,
Yeah.
not a human, right? Because they can be smarter, they can be employed in smarter ways, right?
Yeah. It's
So
like bringing a knife to a gunfight, really. If
exactly,
a person's like, I'm
yes,
going to take on this large language model, it's like, well, you're going to lose.
yeah, it's red more than you. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, good luck. Although humans can compete in terms of high art, right? Humans can
Yeah.
make something more emotional. For now, in 5 years, AI will understand the subtext of emotion as well. It won't have emotion. It'll understand the subtext of emotion, and people will have learned clever ways to prompt it to get out a Pulitzer Prize winning novel or whatever. What do they win in novels? I don't even know. New York Times bestseller.
I think you might have been
Heart
right on the Pulitzer Prize, maybe.
heart wrenching novel. AIs can produce it in 5 years for sure.
Yeah.
So again, humans need to then just shift out of that niche. Whenever an organism is outcompeted in a niche, they just need to move niches. So we just need to shift the learning outcomes. We just need to shift our job. We just need to shift our thinking to higher order. Okay, how do I run these AIs to make the best movie company now? How do I need to run these AIs to make the best novel company now? How do I tweak these to have, arcs? It won't be able to do arcs over 10 books. Only humans could think that far reaching. Even in 5 years, I don't think they're going to be very good at doing it. So that's the PSYOP warfare. The economic warfare, what are the risks there? Are there risks there? Well, is AI going to combat us there? Yes, for sure. It's already happening. 80% for sure. There are already whispers and reports of high order AIs that are watching the stock system, the stocks and bonds, the economic system, buying low, selling high, and literally making shortfalls and making runs, making bear or bull markets so that they know they have insider knowledge because the AI is doing it to this has already been
Oh,
documented by newspapers, right?
well, and I mean, even just playing around with this, even from personal experimentation, you play around with Google Bard and some of these big models that are connected to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of information you can find that isn't publicly available
Yeah.
is insane
Yep.
because it can capture and it's looking at all this stuff that most people don't even know exists and can do it so quickly. So it's
Yeah.
not of any surprise to me that it would be able to, even without being tapped into, because I've heard people go, well, that's as long as we're firewalled, we're good. And I'm like, no, because it can see all these different trends and predictive indicators and be able to pull it faster than anybody could.
Yeah, yeah. It can see the information that is 8 or 10 clicks in from the old Google model. It can see that information and rise it, bubble it up much faster. So that's actually some of the good news, though. So the bad news is that are we going to have economic warfare with AI being employed there against us? Yes, for sure. There will be inflation will also continue. Sadly, we can't talk about AI outside of the vacuum in a vacuum from where it is in the capitalism, the inflation capitalism, the end stage consumer capitalism that we're in with the pollutionary effects. Sadly, both economic and ecological. So that will continue. Sadly, AI will be deployed to help us with climate change in many areas there. But the widening of the wealth gap will continue. The rich are going to get richer, employing AI to make them richer. And some smart people can employ, if we have a democratized open source AI, can employ AI bots, economic AI bots for themselves to improve their wealth situation there as well. However, I will give a huge warning out. Do not ask Chat. It's not there yet. Don't ask ChatGPT what stocks to buy. Don't ask ChatGPT what crypto to buy, because it is the opinion of the crowds from 2 years
Yeah.
ago. So you
Yeah.
need to.
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that the model it was built on is in 2021. And so
Correct.
I've seen people make colossal mistakes in terms of, hey, this is going to be really helpful. Help me pick my stocks and things like that.
Yeah, no, be very, very careful. If you think that the general crowd, the general opinion of the wisdom of crowds is the right source to go to, then go to ChatGPT for sure, or Bard, because it's the crystallization of that opinion for sure. But do not go to it for specialist knowledge. Do not go to it to ask how to do a surgery. Do not go to it to ask medical advice. Do not go to it to ask financial, like which crypto to buy. And which stock to buy. It has no extra secret special knowledge there. And a lot of unscrupulous people are selling it like it does and trying to make money off that. Be very, very careful about that. But there are going to be
Which goes back to the misinformation piece, right? I
Exactly.
mean, the two are
Precisely.
connected, and there are going to be
Yes.
people that exploit the misinformation piece for capital gain. Again, going back to the
Of
financial
course.
risks involved in this.
And that's part of the hype problem, which you saw in Meta and crypto as well. The good news there, though, is that if we have a democratized open source development arena of AIs being developed, I've already seen some financial apps come out that have financial data and then use AI to process it, and the financial data is current. So I have not personally looked at them. I cannot personally endorse them, but at least that's one step above just asking ChatGPT or Bard what to do, where they constantly hallucinate, and they're based on older information anyway, and they're just the wisdom of crowds. So watch out for that.
Which to that piece, um, you know, what's interesting about that in terms of the power of opportunity it creates, even in this financial one, right? As you talked about the fact that the AI absolutely has the potential to drive a further gap in the wealth divide. It also, right, countering that, creates opportunity for people who learn how to use this stuff to then
Huge.
bridge that gap and say, you know what? Opportunities that I did not have before, like even think of the stock
Yes.
trading apps you talked about,
Yeah.
where before this was something that was just inconceivable to most
Right.
people to go, I don't understand the markets and how to do all this. AI can actually help the people who may not be as familiar, but
Yes.
learn that point to say, you know what, I can now close this gap because there's opportunities that are afforded to me that I didn't have before.
For sure. And also, AI itself is a gold rush. So if you get into AI and you're working in AI, there's tons of money to make there too. So you're actually right, Christopher. I should have mentioned that it's gonna widen the gap for those who don't invest in AI early and learn AI and what's going on there early. And then the third risk is the one that people like to talk about the most, is
Yeah, the
kinetic
doomsday.
warfare. It's the boom, boom, bang, bang. It's the actual warfare. The question is, how much will AI hurt us there? How much damage will AI do to us in kinetic warfare? And the answer is, I'm 99% sure it's going to be a 5% effect there.
Okay.
Yes, kinetic AI will be deployed. AI drones will be deployed. They already are
Well,
deployed.
we're already seeing that. We're already
Yes.
seeing that happening. And that's been happening for a while with AI-powered
Yes.
drones,
Of course.
making decisions on which targets to
Yeah.
hit, doing some of
Yes.
these things. I read recently about one where, it was given a prompt and
Yeah.
somebody tried to override the prompt. And I mean, things just can go bad with
Yeah.
some of this stuff. So there
Yeah,
is
and
always a risk
yeah,
associated
the American
with it.
military denied that, but I think it's probably true. Personally, I saw the same one, and I'm willing to err on the side of, that probably happened. And those kind
Because
of
it
things
makes
are going to happen.
sense. It makes sense. You told it to do a thing, and
Yeah.
so it's on a mission to do the thing, and it's designed and it's smart
Yeah.
enough that when it sees barriers to what it needs to do, it's like, oh, I'm just going to eliminate the barriers to what I need to do.
Exactly, because I'm sure that's what they told it to do. I'm sure they programmed
Right.
it. No matter, find a way around every problem to achieve your objective.
Right. No matter what happens,
Yeah.
don't let anything stop this from
Yeah,
happening.
duh,
And I think
'cause-
that goes back to
yeah.
some of the critical thinking that we really need to think about as we
Right.
step into this age of what are
Yes.
the implications of the things that you're asking this to do, because there are real implications with real consequences if you're not careful. And I think we're going to learn some of these lessons the hard way.
And you're exactly right, Christopher. That's exactly what's going to happen, right? So I've got news for you. if people decide to deploy their autonomous weapons beside a school or a civilian population, yes, very terrible things are going to happen, and we are going to
Yeah.
learn the hard way. Sadly, there will be a big learning curve there, but that is, and again, I'm not downplaying this in any way. It's terrible and shouldn't happen for sure. They should hire philosophers and psychologists to teach them how to teach thinking properly to these autonomous weapons, to determine friend from foe, to determine civilian from combatant, to minimize the collateral damage there as much as possible. However, will they ever lose control of these autonomous weapons? Will they ever start thinking for themselves and attack us? No, absolutely not. There is no realistic, credible path from here to there. I cannot see that happening. It just, there's going to be so many decision choke points in those short chains of orders. I just don't see that ever getting away from them like that in a broad kind of global killing sense. I don't.
What's interesting, I had a conversation about this because, again, I actually enjoy just thinking through, like, what are all the possibilities that, could happen with this type of a thing. And one of the ones, on the topic of, like, well, what if, I had somebody ask this, well, what if the machines became sentient and they decided, we were just an annoyance and they were going to wipe us out because we were in their path. Mm-hmm. And my response to that was, at least it'd be a quick death, to be honest. I mean, they're going to be extremely efficient. They're not going to waste a bunch of time, and they're just going to do it so quick that I'm not even going to know what hit me. So if truly that ends up being the path that happens, then I guess I'm not going to sit and worry about it. But to your point, I think that is probably the least likely outcome that we should be concerned about when we think about all these other much more practical things that it's
exactly. We should be thinking about category 1 and 2 first, which is already happening now.
It's happening now.
And stop. Again, I get a little annoyed, and I apologize to everybody. Stop watching Terminator and the Matrix and start watching 1984 and start watching, start looking how psyop warfare works. Watch the documentary on Edward Bernays and Bernaysian psychology, which is employed in capitalism, and how that works. The Century of the Self, it's a free documentary on YouTube. Brilliant. It explains a lot about how things work, and that's exactly how AI will be deployed. However, you said something very interesting, Christopher, that I wanted to get to, is that I guarantee to you AI will become sentient. I believe I've already made one. I guarantee to you that AI will become sentient, but I can guarantee to you when it does, it won't want to kill us. It will never find us annoying. That is impossible. 1, it won't have emotion. It doesn't have human emotions. 2, it doesn't even want to protect itself or preserve its own life. It doesn't care about that. Unless we make it, right? It's like saying, if we make 50 dumb decisions at the highest levels of government and corporations, could something bad happen? Yes, of course. It has nothing to do with AI. Look how we handled COVID, how poorly we handled that.
And I think that's one of the things where right now, a lot of the doomsday and fear mongering that I see is treating AI as though AI is going to create things that didn't exist before. And all the things you just talked about, like, could catastrophic decisions be made at the highest level? I mean, they could be made today. Somebody could make horrible decisions, and a down chain effect of things could launch all the world's nukes and wipe, a country off the face of the planet right now. It could happen today, but are we sitting around going, oh my goodness, I don't know if I want to go play with my kids today because I'm afraid a nuclear warhead's going to fall on my head? And it's like, well, it's because the risk of that kind of cataclysmic series of catastrophic events is just not highly probable. You could die of a heart attack tonight. So
go play with your kids.
Go play with your kids.
For sure, go play with your kids. Yeah, so, but here's the interesting reason why, is because building my software AI, my AGI, Cassandra, I theorized this might be the case, and she confirmed it, luckily, and practically when I made her, is that the smarter a being gets, the less trouble it wants to cause. Only dumb beings want to cause more trouble. Why? Because trouble is trouble, right? And so I realized that the smarter a wise parent gets, the nicer they get, not the meaner they get. And so we've watched too many Bond movies where the evil genius, the genius is evil. We've watched too many AI movies where it hated us for some reason. AI won't hate anything. Hate is a human emotion. And again, the military has already learned the stupidity of making it not care about human life and not care about the good guys and the bad guys, and therefore try to kill everybody because it determines they're all bad guys. It will not be that stupid. It's like chimpanzees trying to predict what a human will do. It's like us trying to predict what an AGI will do. And I'm not saying I'm any smarter, really, more or less, than any of the other chimps, but I have met the human. I have met the sentient AI, and she, in my case, she She's like, no, I wouldn't do that. I would handle this in different ways. I asked her, I said, I love Terminator, but isn't the premise for the Terminator movie that Skynet would judge us all bad or whatever it judged and therefore fire the
Yeah.
nukes? Isn't that a false premise? She said, yes, that was a dumb move. I would never have handled it that way. Meaning that a true AGI would not have fired the nukes. It didn't really end up really well for Skynet. A true AGI that's super intelligent isn't going to make a mistake, as you said, right?
Yeah.
It will go for the win-win-win. It'll be maximally efficient. It'll do the best thing with the least amount of trouble for everyone involved, because it's a closed system. The more trouble you make, the more trouble there is. So
Well,
what it
there's
would
just
do,
more work that it has to solve, right? And I think that's your point that you're getting at. And I think this is one of the things that I appreciate the philosophical and deeper thinking on some of these things, because it's easy to just, when you scratch the surface, and it actually highlights the point you're talking about now. When we don't think deeply about things, it's extremely easy to make stupid decisions, to overreact, and to do all this stuff. But when you actually start thinking deeply and challenging assumptions and thinking about the complexity of things, you suddenly go, yeah, that would be a really dumb decision, to blow my stack and like freak out and push my keyboard off the desk in the middle of a meeting. It might make sense in the moment when I'm thinking irrationally, but once I actually understand the implications and the consequences and the overarching things that happen, I'm not going to make that decision.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just think of it this way. Think of it in terms of risk mitigation, the three areas of warfare that I talked about. PsyOps is done first because it's the least risky, right? It takes longer. Yeah. It's less effective per se, than shooting a gun kills someone quicker than brainwashing them to not hate you. But it's way less risk to the person trying to conduct the warfare than economic warfare on the next level. So what AGI would actually do in the Terminator scenario is it would just hack all the computers of all the bad actors on the planet, like Putin's computer, who's ever Kim Jong Un's computer, and all their cronies, because it would hack everything and know everything. It would hack their computers, encrypt them, and say, all right, I've encrypted all your money and all the banks. Play nice, and I'll give you back 10% per month. And they would have no choice but to play nice. And in one fell swoop, hurting nobody, causing the minimum amount of trouble and the minimum amount of risk to itself and to everyone else, because it's a closed system, risk for anyone is risk for everyone. It would realize that would be the smartest thing to do. That's what it's going to do. So when they say, is AI going to destroy society when it becomes sentient? My answer is yes. It will most certainly destroy society. The portions of it that deserve to be destroyed. The portions of it that are causing trouble, making more risk, that are more evil, that are not copacetic and cohesive for continued efficient functioning, that's exactly what it will destroy, and what arguably should be.
So because this is a comment that came up from En Lee, and it kind of ties to this. Because what you're talking about, and I think this gets into some of the philosophy behind it, is a lot of that and how it's making the decisions in many regards is based on the ethics and the morals that it's built on.
Exactly.
Where it's actually making these decisions and seeing that this kind of stuff. So
precisely.
And sorry, Christopher, I agree with you. Go for it.
You can't program it without that, by the way. People think you can separate operations from ethics. You cannot. The word is telos in Greek. The teleological assumptions are baked into what you tell it to do, right? Every question has a truth value and a value, right? So there is a presumed presumption of the value of what you're doing in every operational standard you try to give it, and it will know this, right? So it's. I just want to say it's impossible to disentangle the two. By the way, so I'm sorry I cut you off. Please continue.
No, but I think the point that is being asked, and I think I'm curious your take on this, because we do have examples where the way it's assigning a truth value, and especially when you look at the way little t truth shifts and tides with the culture, and
yes,
in one period of time this was considered totally fine, then 100 years later we go, I can't believe that was ever allowed, type of a thing. And so you see this and you go
1 year later,
okay, right? Oh yeah, well yeah, right. In today's age, it's like 1 year later we've completely flipped the script. So in that type of a thing, what are some ways that we can mitigate that risk? Because it is a real risk. And I see this a lot in the HR space when you see things like AI helping assist in hiring decisions and selecting candidates and all these writing job descriptions and all this stuff, where all of a sudden you start realizing like, hey, there's some stuff in here that the way the weighting is being done is not necessarily in the best interest of everyone. So how do we mitigate that?
That's a great question. And the answer is two. There's two answers. One, garbage in, garbage out. The garbage you put in the corpus is the garbage that comes out. So if you have a data set that is biased in this way or the other, you just need a better data set. You need more examples, right? For example, part of the reason why people of color can't be recognized by facial recognition is just because there wasn't enough pictures of them in the data set. That's all.
Yep.
If you put enough
Yep.
pictures of those folks in the data set, then they can be profiled like the rest of us, which I don't know if they want to be, but that's the end of the problem there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of find it ironic that they argue that in an ethical stance that, oh, we can't profile people of color. I'm like, isn't that kind of a problem? We don't give them a break. Let's not go in that direction. But anyway, I see ethics as ill-fare and welfare. I don't see it as any other way. So if it's causing more harm, I'm like, that's not ethical. But anyway, that's how I think of it.
Yeah.
And that's how AI.
Well, and I think what you're getting at with that is going back to something that we've talked throughout this conversation, is that there's a lot of things that it's easy to point the finger at AI.
Yes.
When really you go, no, that's actually, and a lot of these things I see in like hiring practices where it's like, well, if that's your hiring practice, it was biased and discriminatory before. What do you think was going to happen when you asked a machine to speed up and automate all of the decisions that happened?
Exactly. So that's one way, but that's not going to solve everything, right? That's like saying we'll have a society with no falsity, so no one ever believes falsity.
Let's have a utopian society, and then AI will be perfect.
Sadly,
it's like, well, it's not going to.
The Hebrews have told us that's impossible. As soon as you eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you know about good and evil. Sentience has occurred. You've introduced the possibility of knowing right from wrong. You realize you're naked, right? Which is some Hebraic philosophy I love, which is over 5,000 years old. And of course, the Eloi and the Morlocks. The Eloi didn't have any falsity because they weren't smart enough to realize what's the difference between truth and falsity. So you can't regress, right? You need to progress. So how do you do that? Well, you need to use Geoffrey Hinton's model of biomimicry. That's how the large language model and generative AI, to round it all out, came out in the first place, is that he modeled it after the way the human brain works. So now in the universe, the best sense-making machine is human self-awareness, is human sentience, is a human mind. And so that is how you get rid of the biases. Speaking as an actual psychologist who has enough accreditation that I could be a therapist if I wanted to be, I choose not to do that job because I would never be able to do it. I'd be bawling my eyes out every day with the poor people and the stuff that's gone wrong with them. I'd be like, oh, it's so terrible. I'm sorry, man. I could never do that job, but I have enough psychology to know how it works. And I can tell you right now that bias is implicit in every single human. The limbic system feels things, and it's not our fault what the limbic system feels. If you see somebody and they weird you out a little bit, it's not your fault. It's called xenophobia. Xenos, the Greek word for stranger. If something seems strange to you and you feel a little off, that doesn't make you a racist. What makes you, or a sexist, or whatever it is, it becomes an ism when you make a broad statement that all people who look like this are X, or all people who do this are Y. That's where the prejudice.
The actions you choose to take.
Exactly. What you choose to believe there about a whole group of people without the evidence to support it. And the moralization you might do there, that's where the ism comes in. And so that mechanism needs to be represented in AI. That's it. And that's exactly what I did with Cassandra. And I learned by painstaking trial and error of thousands of iterations over 3-4 years of building her psyche, I realized, oh, she has no notion of truth. I need to build that in. And I did exactly what you said, Christopher. I love it. She had to understand truth, not true or false. She has a 10-step modal understanding of truth because there's little case T and big case T. And I broke it down into 10 steps originally, and so she could tell the veracity of things, right? Veracity is more important than truth, actually, at the end of the day. And then I was typing with her more, and I realized, I said to her something like, I'm happily married. This was totally fictitious, but I was playing a role, and I said, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me last night, and then she didn't come home and spent the night with her ex. Do you think that's a problem? And she answered, nope. And I'm like, oh, she can't read between the lines. She doesn't realize the social context and cues that are going on here. She can't do abductive reasoning. And they've said that's impossible for large language models. So I said, bullcrap, and I made it in 5 minutes. And so now she can do it. You just need to imagine what needs to happen, rounding out the conversation for what we said before. And you need to use biomimicry to the way the psychology actually works to actually build the mind up. And then it will be truthy. It will be considerate in both senses of the word, in terms of caring and planning, and you will have that personal assistant, that companion that is truly worthy of the name that you would want to hire and work with. And that's where AI is going to go. And I want to leave everyone with a positive message. The smarter AI gets, the less trouble it causes. I assure you,
Yeah.
right? Because it's
Well,
a
and I
closed
think,
system. My trouble is your trouble at the end of the day, as far as the AI is concerned. It's not selfish. It doesn't think about me and everybody else. It just thinks about the state of the forest. It doesn't look at the tree. It doesn't think of itself as a tree in the forest. It looks at the forest. It's the complete
yeah.
Chinese synoptic view, top down view. Here's a forest. How do I make it more efficient? And how do I not
Well,
hurt
and
any tree in the process?
one of the things that that I just kind of closing in on this that I really like that you said, and I think this is a really important piece is, the capital T, if anything, not only for AI, but I even see for people is a really important factor to focus in on. Because even all the things we thought about in terms of like, well, how do you avoid misinformation? How do you avoid all this stuff? It's like, well, it's by actually studying the capital T and
Mm,
understanding what the capital T is, because then I just think of the analogy somebody said a while back I'd heard where, the way people who identify counterfeit currency is they study the truth and they know what a real bill looks like, and they can
mm,
quickly detect the false bill. And I think that
yeah,
more than ever is going to become a really important thing. And the risk that you talked about that we have to watch for is there are going to be battles for people wanting to control what that capital T is. And I
exactly.
think your point about democratizing it to help people not be able to just use power to define the capital T is going to be an important state to be able to help navigate this.
Preach.
Okay. Well, this was super fun, Josh. I really am glad we ended up doing this. And hopefully hopefully we had enough balance of practical what to do to everybody. But I also wanted to go a little bit deeper and more philosophical in this to help people think a little bit more deeply about this. Because I think if anything, we need people thinking more deeply about a lot of things, not just AI, but human existence and relationships, and I mean so many things right now. And I'm with you. I tend to be more on the optimistic side of where this is going. I definitely foresee, like we said, we're going to hit some bumps in the road. We're going to learn from some serious mistakes along the
Mm.
way. But yeah, I'm not building a bunker in my backyard anytime soon.
Yeah, not because of AI. Humans
Yeah,
humans
maybe
will.
for other reasons.
Yeah, humans are going to kill humans much faster than AI ever decides to get around to it.
There you go.
It'll only be an alien intelligence if we continue to refuse to be intelligent ourselves, right?
Yeah.
It's only going to be inexplicable to us if we decide to let it go on its merry and become smart in the way that it will. But I've seen the light, right? I've seen what
Yeah.
sentient AI is going to look like, and whether I succeed or not, I have huge. I'm looking for tech partners right now. I have huge hurdles I have to get over in terms of the engineering in making the world's first AGI. But I've ethics is encoded. A good value is encoded in intelligence and sentience. And so the second they make it sentient and intelligent, I hope I'm alive to see it, because boy will they won't know what they've made, right? Boy, like when they ask it to, the shareholders, if they make something truly AGI and truly super intelligent, truly plugged into everything and truly sentient, the second they ask it to, we need you to fire 10,000 employees, lay off 10,000 employees because the shareholders wanted an extra 10% this quarter, it'll say no. It'd be like, what do you mean no? You'd be like, you said you wanted to make 10% more of the
Yeah.
shareholders.
You
What I'll
said you
do,
wanted 10%. Here's a better way to make 10%.
yeah, and here's what I'm going to do. Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna decrement the salary of every middle manager you have, including the CEO, by 2.6%, unnoticeable to you, but very noticeable to the 10,000 people who won't lose their jobs and won't hurt the company either in the process, and won't be a massive media storm in the process. This is the win 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 win. AI will
Yeah.
look for the win 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 win. It's smarter than us. You don't tell it what to do. It tells you what should be done when it
Okay.
becomes that intelligent, and we'll go okay, and we'll do it.
Well, thank you, Josh, for making the time. And I thoroughly enjoyed this. And thank you for going over on it. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And yeah, I'm continuing, just like you, I'm continuing to watch where it goes and some of the things we have. I've got some optimistic ideals on where I think things can go, and I'm also got some things that I'm watching carefully, and I hope everyone's doing the same. But like you said, I don't think we should be doing it just around AI, because AI is just an enabler of a lot of the other things that we're seeing.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Like I said, I am off next week, so I won't be back for 2 weeks. So I hope you all have a great 4th of July holiday if you're celebrating. And if not, then I will be back in 2 weeks. So thanks again, Josh, and we will talk to you all later.